Welcome back to the Rum Ration Podcast, where we wade through the cold, the mud, and the chaos of military history, usually with a healthier amount of central heating than the subjects that we're going to be talking about today had to endure. I'm Colin.
And I'm Rejoy. And Colin, where are we today?
We are at the RCMI, the Royal Canadian Military Institute. We've got their cups. We are
cheers to them.
Cheers to them, and there might be a little rum in there,
just a little bit.
And of course, we're brazenly violating the dress code.
Well, the Royal Canadian Military Institute is a hallowed institution, of course, and they are very particular about the way they dress, unlike us.
And hopefully I won't get my membership canceled. But we do have our official Rum Ration caps, and we have our Rum Ration shirts.
We are in uniform.
But look at can everyone read what that says? What does it say on there?
It says December 2024.
December 2024. That means it's been 1 year, folks. Today we're recording on the 13th of December. Our first official podcast was released on the 14th of December.
Yes.
That's incredible. Hard to believe.
And thanks to all of you out there for supporting us through our journey. And, you know, there's more of fun to come in discovering and exploring military history. But today, Colin, we are going to the Ardennes.
That's right. Yeah. Not from Toronto. We're in Toronto today.
Yes.
At the RCMI.
Yes.
Which is the first time we've done this together.
That's right. In the same city.
In the same city. In the same room. Sitting beside each other. And you're getting a little frisky with your hands, but...
that's the rum.
Other folks who were getting frisky at this time was back in December 1944. What happened then, Rejoy?
December 1944. That's where Adolf Hitler launched his...
Not a friend of the show, I think.
Not a friend of the show at all. And he launched his last desperate offensive to break the West. It was a gamble aimed to split the Allied armies, seize Antwerp, and force a political crisis. And instead, what did he get? He got the largest, bloodiest battle fought by the U.S. Army on his hands.
Right. And why would he want to go to Antwerp?
Antwerp's the ports.
Aha.
The ports. Very important.
Very important. Got to get all the beans, bullets, and ammunition and all that good stuff up to the troops, right?
That's where it all comes from.
So this was a story of, I believe, of overconfidence. We would know nothing about that.
No, that's not really our style, is it?
No. Ambition.
Well, we don't know very much about that. No.
Brutal weather.
We know about brutal weather. We know that we know.
Indomitable resolve of soldiers. I'm not sure we can be accused of indomitable resolve. But these poor bastards found themselves in the wrong forest at the wrong moment, but they refused to break. This is the Battle of the Bulge.
The Battle of the Bulge, and this is not a diet show. It's a different one. The Battle of this particular Bulge is fair to say had very little to do with your diet. But what we should say is, where did the inspiration of today's episode come from? It came from our good friend Simon McLean, who was on course with us in Gagetown years ago. And, good old Simon decided that nothing says festive season quite like fog, frostbite, and a desperate counteroffensive.
I think he also thinks it's because his birthday's coming up. I think his birthday's on the 16th. So shout out. This is going to be released after that, but shout out to Simon, who is a friend of ours from the Black Watch.
That's right.
Thank you for the suggestion. Anyone else has an episode suggestion? Send them our way. So Simon, truly a man of impeccable timing and cheerful historical instincts.
Absolutely.
Thank you for this, and happy birthday from the Rum Ration Podcast.
Indeed.
Now, before we get to the chaos, which is something we kind of specialize in.
We know about chaos.
Let's set the stage. It's late 1944. After the breakout from Normandy, the Allies first liberated Paris, then pushed across France and Belgium, and were approaching Germany's borders.
Yeah, that's right. But the advance came with some real strains.
Yeah.
Supply lines were stretched hundreds of miles. Fuel was light. Ammunition was rationed because there wasn't much going around at that point in time. Only Allied units... the Allied units themselves were thinly spread across a massive front, the Ardennes, heavily forested. Have you been through the Ardennes?
I have.
Yeah, it's a heavily forested area. I've seen it myself, and few good roads, and it's better now than it was then.
Yeah,
but you can just imagine. And it was designated as a quiet sector, and traditionally, it's always been kind of designated as a quiet sector because the thought being you can't get through the Ardennes.
Get through there, yeah. Although you think they'd have learned after the invasion of France in 1940.
Yeah, where they got the panzers through. 1940, that was such a long time ago.
Who would do it again? Who would do it
That was just dumb luck.
Well, one of the things I think is interesting about this, and we'll get into some details about it, but the fuel aspect you mentioned, fuel was tight, and I believe it was something like 10 to 1, like 10 to 1 gallons of fuel, 10 gallons to deliver 1 gallon to the front of fuel. That's incredible. Right. Yeah. And the Germans themselves, of course, were awfully short on fuel because they didn't have any refining capabilities or any natural sources. Yeah,
that's right. Because their main source was in Romania, Ploesti, the Ploesti oil fields, and they lost those a long time ago. So everything was very tightly rationed.
Wow. And so this quiet sector in the Ardennes for the Allies, that would mean rest, recuperation, integrating replacements to the kind of badly mangled troops. And the Americans put the Green 106th Division, green meaning inexperienced, they were there, along with some really worn-down units like the 28th Infantry Division. They were tired, they were under strength, and crucially, they believed they were very safe.
Yeah, that's right. And, like you said, green means inexperienced. They weren't eco-soldiers. They were not environmentalists.
So Elizabeth May was not there.
She was not there. No, I don't think so. But she might have been. That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
That's right. And traditionally, that is the area where you pull your weakened troops back, let them rest up, get back into shape, replenish them, and you think nothing is really going to happen. For Hitler, he saw that as a weakness.
Right.
He saw opportunity. And that's one thing Hitler used to be pretty good at the beginning.
Right.
His instincts had been good. He lost a lot of that later on, but
he was a gambler.
He was a gambler, and he saw this as his last final big gamble. So despite catastrophic losses on the Eastern Front and the devastation wrought by Allied bombing, because the Allies owned the air.
And they were pounding the shit out of
all the time. He still believed a massive counterstroke in the West might rupture the Allied coalition.
Right. And his logic was, it was pretty sound. Split the British and Americans by driving to Antwerp, trap key Allied armies, force a negotiated peace, and then turn everything east back to face the Soviets and finish them off. I mean, it looked good on paper.
It looked very
big
good on paper.
Big hand, small map, moving quickly, lots of yelling.
Yes, he liked his pencils,
Yeah. It was
this way,
possibly
that way.
Bold to the point of delusion, but it was bold nonetheless. We'll give him that. It was bold.
Well, one of the things that he sort of took inspiration from was Frederick the Great.
Of course.
Where...
Friend of the show.
Very, very big friend.
As Hal pointed out to us last episode.
That's right. And that was a great episode where Hal really...
Episode 31.
He was wonderful the way he explained everything there. But again, I'll try and get back on track.
Well, yes.
When in the 7 Years' War, where Russia, originally a foe of Frederick's Prussia, because that's where the coalition was, and then all of a sudden the Tsar died.
Right.
And I think it was Catherine the Great who was
took over. Yeah.
And she loved Frederick the Great.
Who wouldn't?
Right.
Cut a dashing figure.
He did cut a dashing. He was quite the guy. So all of a sudden,
who's reining who in back on track on this? Are you reining me or am I reining you?
Sorry, where are we again?
Exactly. I think we're in the Ardennes, 1944.
Back there.
Right there.
So the idea being that he was hoping by splitting the armies, he would create the same sort of miracle that Frederick experienced. And then he called it his plan. He got this big plan together. He called it Wacht am Rhein, so watch on the Rhine.
Uh-huh.
A deliberately misleading name to fool Allied intelligence, because by that point he knew that whatever he was planning or doing would be found out. So that's why he called it Watch on Rhine.
Try and fool the British and Americans into thinking that he was setting up a watch repair shop where you could bring your Rolexes in and get them. No?
Omegas too.
Or considering they were going to stay on watch, just a defensive perimeter.
Perimeter.
Got it.
But that's the main thing. Right. It's like, we're not attacking. We are reinforcing our borders.
Right.
We are going to stand watch on the Rhine.
Right.
And stop you from crossing over.
And it worked. The Allies didn't anticipate anything major. Eisenhower himself believed the Germans were no longer capable of a large-scale offensive.
And that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So it came as a horrific surprise. Early hours, December 16th, 1944. Imagine that. You think you're in a safe sector, and then all hell breaks loose in this quiet sector. A massive artillery barrage hammered the American lines. In some places, the fog was so thick, soldiers couldn't see for more than about 30 feet ahead.
That would have been surprising, because not only would they thought it was quiet, they would have thought the Germans were weak and probably didn't have that much
artillery. Didn't have artillery, right?
Right.
I mean, you remember we talked earlier about the Band of Brothers. And that episode where, of course, everything was about Easy Company.
Of course. They won the war.
Yeah. Sorry?
They won the war by themselves.
Yeah, of course they did. Of course they did. But that iconic episode of them in the Ardennes.
Yes.
And where they're hit by the artillery out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That's something that gives you a little itty bitty taste of what it could have been like.
Yeah, and if you thought metal shell splinters were bad enough, now in the forest you've got wooden splinters flying around all over the place
That's
too.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And the main assault fell on the 106th Infantry Division, on the Schnee Eifel, and the battle-worn 28th Division. So the 106th, particularly was badly positioned, spread thin across miles of ridgeline, limited radios. Not good communications.
Not good communications.
Little experience. Oh, this is sounding great. And no idea what was coming.
No, terrible.
Sounds like my wedding night.
So within 48
I'm going to get in trouble for that one.
We'll
see if
you
anyone
certainly
listens.
are. Oh, boy. Within 48 hours, 2 entire regiments of the 106th have been surrounded. Thousands surrendered. It remains one of the largest mass surrenders in U.S. Army history.
Wow. The weather, which Hitler counted on, played its part. Snow drifts were waist deep, although that goes two ways because attackers have to go through that, right?
Yeah.
Ice was forming on rifles, but most importantly, fog was grounding the Allied aircraft.
Yeah, that was the big thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, so no more air superiority. And the U.S. Army recorded over 15,000 cold weather injuries in that winter alone.
15,000?
That's huge.
Can you imagine? Well, with
General Winter,
with everything happening, the Germans, it's no surprise the Germans advanced rapidly through places like Losheim Gap, but crucial delays began to accumulate. And that's the thing. It's like driving on the Gardner. You're racing along, or the carry, and all of a sudden, little delays begin to accumulate. St. Vith, a town in Belgium in particular, held up for days, throwing off the German timetable. And that's so important. The timetable was of extreme importance if this operation was to succeed.
We've learned one thing in the last year of this podcast is that the Germans love a good timetable.
Oh, nothing like a good timetable.
That's why I got confused with the whole watch on the Rhine thing. I presumed
they
it was
got
related
you.
to the watch.
They got you.
They did.
Yeah.
But speaking of which, time was everything. The Germans didn't have the fuel for a long operation, so every hour of delay was a nail in the offensive coffin.
Yeah, exactly. And well, talking about offensive, this is a good time to bring in our fantasy sponsor for this episode, Ardennes Frostbite Reserve.
That's right, Rejoy. Crafted in small batches and matured in barrels chilled to I can't feel my fingers. Frostbite Reserve promises a flavor profile as sharp as a December wind off the Schnee Eifel.
Indeed, with notes of pine smoke, frozen leather, and the lingering regret of underestimating German armored divisions.
And unlike certain German Panther tanks, it actually contains enough fuel to get you through the night.
Ardennes Frostbite Reserve, because sometimes the only thing that should thaw is your rum, not your resolve.
Nice one. We don't have a sponsor for this, but we did bring in our own little, perhaps, maybe we can approach them afterwards, see if they'll, a good Montreal brand.
Yes, a good Montreal brand.
As the front buckled in places and American commanders scrambled to understand the scale of the attack, another layer of chaos swept through the Allied rear areas. Deception. And at the center of it all was a name that deserves its own moment in the story, Otto Skorzeny.
Skorzeny.
So
Skorzeny was already something of a legend by 1944. Just a year before, he pulled off the spectacular rescue of Benito Mussolini, that's when Italy changed sides.
Right. As they like to do.
And and why not? Why not? I mean, why stick with the losing side when you can be on the winning side?
That's right.
And so Benito Mussolini had been taken prisoner by the partisans, and it was Skorzeny who, on Hitler's orders, put together a crack commando team and rescued him from the mountaintop hotel in Italy where he was being held captive. One part of it was real skill, military skill. One part of it was propaganda, theater. But it was brilliant enough that Hitler started calling him the most dangerous man in Europe, which is one hell of a LinkedIn recommendation. If you have to admit,
I think
I'd like to have that.
People remember that. People remember that. Yeah. More than the most dangerous man on Summerhill. Which is how Skorzeny found himself in charge of Operation Greif, which was
Greif.
Wow. All right, then. One of the strangest and most psychologically effective missions of the entire war. His orders were bold to the point of sheer recklessness. Gather English-speaking soldiers, dress them in American uniforms, which we should point out is completely counter to the laws of war.
That's right. Yes, it is.
Put them in captured U.S. vehicles, also, yes, unless you repainted them. And send them behind Allied lines to sow as much confusion as humanly possible.
And you know a thing or two about PsyOps yourself.
A little bit, yes. Former chief instructor of the Canadian Psychological Operations Capacity.
There you are. So what would you think of that kind of an
illegal order?
Illegal order. That's not really covered in the PsyOps manual, is it?
No.
But there you go. It actually happened.
Yeah.
And they were directed to change road signs, redirect traffic, and they did all these things. Spread false orders, cut communications, and if the stars aligned, seize key bridges before the Americans realized what was happening, which would have been kind of easy to do by that point.
For sure. They're confused, they're tired,
they're tired,
cold weather problems,
terrified,
don't have enough food. Yeah. And you mentioned before the radios in the 106th.
No comms.
It's no comms, yeah. So that's how rumors really spread.
That's right, yeah.
Right? So in reality, Skorzeny didn't have the resources for the grand-scale commando fantasy that Hitler envisioned. Strange that. Hitler had a lot of great ideas, but never had the resources. But just, make it happen.
No.
But Skorzeny had a handful of teams, not an army of infiltrators. But it turns out he didn't need an army.
No.
Just the idea of Skorzeny's men did most of the work for him.
Yeah, I mean, that's not surprising. You're, as you correctly mentioned, Colin, you're cold, you're tired, you're terrified, no comms, you don't know what's happening. Somebody says something, it's like broken telephone, and it just expands, and people get terrified. And all of a sudden, strongholds begin to crumble.
Right.
What places that should have been held are let go just because you don't know what's going on. Are they Americans? Are they Germans? Who are they? So, and the rumors exploded.
Of course.
Jeep thefts, sabotage, assassination plots. There were even whispers that Skorzeny intended to capture or kill Eisenhower,
Wow.
which created so much alarm that Ike had to limit his public movements for days.
Wow.
So pretty effective.
That's very effective. And soon paranoia became policy. Checkpoints sprang up everywhere. MPs and military police started asking soldiers sporting questions, state capitals, and obscure bits of Americana to prove their identity.
Yeah, like what's the capital of Illinois?
What's the 14th episode of the Rum Ration podcast?
What's the capital of Illinois? Or questions like who won the 1938 World Series? Who's Betty Grable married to? Now these are questions even that I don't know the answers to any of those.
No.
And but it's very American. So
Yeah.
most American soldiers and troops would have some inkling of what to say and
Right.
answer correctly.
Like, who's Katy Perry dating would be like probably a common question today. Right.
Yeah, that's the equivalent. That's a very good example. So that's kind of thing that we're talking about because no Germans would have known the answers to those questions.
Of course not. Yeah.
Unless they were Germans who, here's the small little weak plan that could happen there, because there are a lot of Germans who came back from the United States to
That's right.
Germany to serve. So
That's right.
if you had the misfortune to come and run in one of those, they would have the answers to those questions.
Yeah.
But I think it's safe to say the majority wouldn't be able to answer them.
Right, because they didn't have TikTok, so they weren't really following.
That's right. Yeah. No
Taylor
Instagram.
Swift. There
Yeah.
was not as many Swifties.
Not as many Swifties.
Unlike Jay. Shout out to Jay.
Yes,
He denied it.
yes.
You saw that on LinkedIn, right?
Saw that definitely. He
Yeah.
did.
I think
It was a good attempt. I mean, that's propaganda right there.
I think he doth protest too much. Shout out to Jay. We love you.
We do.
The irony is that Skorzeny's actual impact tactically was modest, but the psychological disruption that Rejoy's been talking about that he caused was immense.
Yes.
For days, Allied logistics were slowed, convoys hesitated, and commanders second-guessed every report from the field.
Yeah, exactly. And Colin, again, like you said, it's important to note that under the Hague Convention, fighting in an enemy's uniform makes you a spy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was exactly the case for Skorzeny's men. So many who were caught were executed on the spot.
Right. And then once, I guess, Allied troops are getting the taste for or the habit of just executing people, they're probably not asking a lot of questions.
Not asking a lot of questions, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Luckily, Canadians never had a reputation for that in either war.
Yeah.
Skorzeny's presence in the battle adds a fascinating dimension. The Ardennes wasn't just tanks, infantry, and frozen foxholes. It was also fear, misinformation, and the unpredictable power of psychological warfare.
Yeah, exactly. And while his commandos couldn't change the outcome of the offensive, there's no way they could. They did what special forces often do best. They amplify chaos at precisely the moment the enemy can least afford it.
That's right. Yeah. And then there was Bastogne, the linchpin of the battlefield. Seven, count them, seven. That's more than six.
That's more than six, less than eight.
As the kids like to say, 6, 7. 7 major roads converge there. Lose it, and the Germans could fan out towards the Meuse River.
That's right. And split the front wide open.
Right.
And the road to Antwerp suddenly open. Right.
And then you get fuel, you can get all the munitions. Yeah.
And disrupt. And that was the other thing. Steal all the fuel, the ammunition supplies that you needed. And of course, for people who are even remotely familiar with the Battle of the Bulge, it's Bastogne. That is the big story that everybody can say, well, I don't know about any of these other things, but I have heard about the town of Bastogne.
Right.
And I think it's the elements of the 101st Airborne and the 10th Armored Division that made it famous. I mean, there was a 101st that held the line around Bastogne. And their reputation was, how can I say it? It was just framed in gold after the way they just held on through grit and just bravery and courage,
sheer determination
and skill, and then finally, By the 20th of December, Bastogne was surrounded. Supplies dwindled. Medical units were overwhelmed. The wounded lay in freezing basements and barns, but the 101st would not give up.
Right. And the Germans, they demanded surrender from them on the 22nd of December, so 2 days later. And the acting division commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe's reply was, quote, nuts, end quote.
Nuts. I would have loved to be a fly on the wall to hear the reaction to nuts. What does he mean by nuts?
Exactly.
Does he want nuts?
We were talking about the cultural references earlier. That's Skorzeny's.
Exactly.
That was nuts. Yeah, I guess we could serve you nuts.
You want nuts?
Would you like warm nuts for Christmas?
If you surrender, you can have all the nuts you want. So
walnuts? Do you want chestnuts?
It's safe to say they were pretty perplexed by this answer.
I would think so.
But it's a short, defiant, and utterly American sentiment, and completely in character for airborne units.
That's right.
Although I think they would use slightly stronger terms.
Possibly.
Because, he was a general, so
Yes.
he was being polite. And probably quite baffling to the Germans, who wouldn't have understood what the heck nuts was supposed to mean. So, like, as we were just saying, it's like, what on earth is this guy talking about?
I guess they would get the idea, at least, that they don't intend to surrender.
I think they might have caught on to that fact.
Right. But as the siege tightened, Bastogne's defenders endured constant shelling.
Yes.
Civilians, we can't forget them, sheltered with the soldiers. Medics treated patients without morphine because the Germans had cut the resupply routes.
Yeah. And then Christmas, which is one of the reasons we're doing this episode now.
That's right.
Right. I mean, perfect backdrop to it. And what a Christmas present the Allies got. My God, all of a sudden, the skies cleared. The ground froze hard. Suddenly.
Can you see what I see?
Exactly.
Air support, flying through the air.
And that's exactly what they started to do. And again, it's hard to underestimate the overwhelming air support superiority that the Allies enjoyed, and just what an effect it had on the troops on the ground and on the Germans.
Because I think those American defenders, the first day of Christmas, their true love gave them to them P-47 Thunderbolts, which ripped into German convoys. Resupply aircraft dropped ammunition. That was probably the second day of Christmas. True love gave that to them.
Yes.
And medical supplies into Bastogne. And then Patton's Third Army, finally, after an extraordinary operational pivot, I just put that finally in there to piss off our American listeners.
Yes, and it sounded quite well. It was very real timed, yes.
I'm sure it'll be in the comments. They raced north.
And on 26 December, the 4th Armored Division, they finally broke through.
There you go.
The siege was lifted. And with that, the Germans had lost both the town and, more importantly, their momentum.
That's the important thing, right? So
Yeah.
the delay had really kind of just taken the momentum out.
All the wind out of their sails, so to speak, but especially for the Navy. So, and on that happy note, and it is a happy note for some, unhappy for others.
Right.
Let's pause for our second fantasy sponsor, Operation Keep Me Warm Rum, the only winter rum specifically engineered for conditions where visibility is 20 feet, optimism is 10, and your toes are rapidly becoming historical artifacts.
Distilled in small batches and matured at a temperature best described as absolutely not. This rum delivers the warmth that the Ardennes famously did not.
Notes of charred oak, winter spice, and a subtle undertone of whose bright idea was the Ardennes in December.
Best served beside a fire, beneath a blanket, and ideally while not holding a defensive perimeter against a mechanized breakthrough.
Operation Keep Me Warm Winter Rum, because the only thing that should freeze in December 1944 is your cocktail glass.
That's right, which, we've kind of overlooked it. We forgot to get ice in our...
We did, I know. Oh, dear.
Yeah, what are we going to do? So why did the Germans fail? Well, there were several reasons.
Yeah. So first, let's talk about logistics.
Yeah,
and that's
important.
Well, and here's a little bit of a bias as infanteers.
Yes.
We always tend to, say,
we're so tough. Yeah.
Exactly. Logistics. But logistics is everything. An army crawls on its belly, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have enough fuel. Their tanks ran dry. Panzer commanders abandoned vehicles on the roadside. I mean, they were littered with these tanks. They just had no fuel.
No fuel. Imagine how frustrating that must be for the crew.
Oh, man.
That's
Can't imagine it.
The second thing, of course, was the terrain. The Ardennes was too dense, too narrow, and too constricted for the rapid mechanized breakout they needed. Because we joked about the 1940 movement. They got lucky.
They got lucky
in 1940.
Yeah,
They hadn't
yeah.
spotted, and that there were intelligence reports that were ignored. I think in 1940.
And also let's remember at that time the tanks that they were using were Mark 1s and Mark 2s.
Yeah,
Smaller
they're
tanks,
much
smaller,
You're
and they
right.
could
That's
maneuver
right.
through the Ardennes,
That's a
those
good point.
paths. And now we're talking about Panthers and Tigers.
Which can't, like, they're restricted to certain bridges you couldn't go over.
That's right.
You're right. Yeah.
Huge tanks. And third, timetable. We always comes back to the timetable. I mean, when you're making a gamble like that, and you've left no room for flexibility,
No room for error
at all. Timetable. The delays at St. Vith, Elsenborn Ridge, and Bastogne ate away at the fleeting window of bad weather. And once the skies cleared, well, that was it. The Allied air power returned, and it returned with a vengeance and devastating effect.
Right, and I guess their fourth reason was overambition. The entire plan assumed simultaneous success across a massive front. A single delay in one sector undermined everything.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You got to build some flexibility into your plan that things are going to go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be ready for it.
There's going to be friction.
Yeah.
And you think they'd have learned that by then?
And the last thing, the fifth reason, American resilience.
Absolutely.
Which had been tremendously underestimated.
Yes.
And that was one of the big failings that Hitler and his staff had, this contempt for American troops. They had no idea who they were up against. And despite the initial chaos, U.S. commanders reacted quickly. They were very flexible. And that's the opposite of the German planning. They were very flexible. They saw everything is going to hell. They pivot. They do what they can. They start reorganizing. Small groups of GIs fought delaying actions in towns and crossroads all over the Ardennes. The Germans, still convinced of their own military greatness, had, they, as we said, underestimated the American toughness, prowess, and determination.
I think it's important to highlight the toughness. These were some tough bastards.
They were tough bastards.
I think a lot of other troops would have cracked. And the Germans just said no. The Germans underestimated them and paid for it.
They paid for it.
Some American units held positions far longer than their orders demanded. A single squad in the right place could slow an entire German column for hours because you couldn't get around, right? You couldn't flank them. You're in a forest.
You're in a forest.
And you're in armored vehicles. You're stuck. So that was,
If those guys aren't leaving and getting out of the way or being killed off, they're going to stop you. And they did.
Right.
So it wasn't glamorous. It was cold, frightening, ugly fighting, but it worked.
It worked. By 25th of January, 1945, the Bulge had been erased.
Yes.
The Germans had lost about 100,000 casualties, killed, wounded, or captured, and you got to think there was a lot of Germans who were taking this as an opportunity to surrender to the
Americans. I think so. Yeah, very much so. Yes.
You could see the end coming.
And they didn't want to fall into the hands of the Russians.
Right. And the Germans lost tanks they could never replace. There was no way. They didn't have the manufacturing capability, because you were talking before about the air power and the bombing campaign.
That's right.
Was flattening their factories. So they couldn't replace these tanks.
Yes.
And I mean, there's one thing losing a tank that's been shot out, but losing a tank because it ran out of fuel, man, that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And the aircraft they couldn't afford, like every aircraft that was being kind of like the tanks, they just couldn't replace
Same thing. Not to say that the Americans didn't suffer. They suffered heavily. I think it was their bloodiest battle of the war. So in terms of statistics, 19,000 killed, Colin.
19,000 killed. That's like
not total casualties.
That's like the first day of the Somme. Those are huge numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Huge numbers. 47,500 wounded. 23,000 missing.
Wow.
23,000 soldiers that you cannot account for. It is terrifying. That's over 100,000 casualties. It is by far the deadliest battle in U.S. Army history to this day.
Yeah.
Or what the Soviet Union's Red Army would call Tuesday.
So that tells you what a slugfest it was. Like the 100,000 casualties on the German side, 100,000 on the American side.
Yeah.
It was not exactly a cakewalk for anyone.
No.
Talk about a grind. Wow. But strategically, the offensive was catastrophic for Germany because it exhausted their reserves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that accelerated their collapse. And 4 months later, that's exactly what happened. Allied troops would be crossing the Rhine.
Yeah, and Churchill called the Battle of the Bulge the greatest American battle of the war.
Wow.
And Eisenhower's son later wrote that the Ardennes broke the back of the Nazi war machine. So high praise indeed.
And for the veterans who survived, memories of the Bulge always began with the cold. The unforgiving cold. And the feeling that everything hung in the balance.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of cold that gets into your bones, right?
Yeah.
It just does not go away again after that. But they also remembered the resolve. The refusal to give up towns like St. Vith or Bastogne, the camaraderie forged in foxholes cut from the frozen earth. I think you could compare it to, say, like the men who have been at Waterloo.
Right.
You know, it's there's that
connection.
connection
forever.
that stays forever.
Yeah.
So
I
for
guess
the
you just had
Americans
to
like
say
that-
to someone, I was at Bastogne.
That's right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah, the Battle of the Bulge, it really shows how wars can pivot on weather, logistics, and sheer human endurance. It wasn't just strategy. It was the stubbornness of the American defenders who were improvising on the spot, and the refusal of the exhausted soldiers who, by all rights, should have, but they refused to break.
They just would not leave.
They just would nuts.
You know,
They were waiting for the nuts.
They're waiting for the nuts. Where are my nuts? Well, yeah, the Germans had a lot of questions about that. And so it's a reminder, though, that even in a massive global conflict, history can hinge on the small acts of determination, Colin. You know, so little things that sometimes make a huge difference, like holding a crossroads, refusing to surrender, standing firm in a winter forest. And, you know, many thanks to dear old Simon McLean, our friend and comrade from so many years ago in Officer School in Gagetown for suggesting this episode. Happy birthday, Simon.
And thank you for joining us on this march through the Ardennes. If you enjoyed this episode, share it, rate it, and pour yourself a tot of rum, indoors and far from any snowbanks.
Like we're doing.
That's right.
And remember, stay curious, stay warm, and stay rationed.
Cheers to history.